These are upcoming concerts for people. Are they going to be the same as last year?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, because we want to film them, and we want to record.
But I mean, when the album was released, I think Roger said that the whole concept was album, stage presentation, and filming.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why didn't you film last year?
Because we thought we were going to rehearse it by doing the shows and then film it in a studio.
Mm-hmm.
Because we thought that filming live would be impossible to get what we wanted. But since doing the shows and then researching filming in a studio, we realised that that's wrong and that it won't work. And that we've got to go back and record it live to get the atmosphere and to get the sort of sound and feeling that we want.
Could you tell me some more about the film?
Not a great deal, but a bit. Film will be made up really of three different elements. One being the live stuff, two being the animation, partly the animation that we've used in the show and partly some more animation, and partly some more stuff shot to illustrate more clearly the ideas contained in the story. But that's a bit vague stuff, and that may depend slightly on how the film turns out, how much of the concept we want to use.
There are not going to be any new numbers used for the film.
Yes, I think there probably will.
Some
That's the plan.
on the top of the wall.
Yeah.
Well, there are plenty of rumors regarding Floyd. The most often one is that you're splitting up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have you ever been on a brink of splitting
Oh
up?
yes, for the last 7 years.
Without joke or...
No, well, I mean, bands are only, they struggle along for as long as there's something worth doing, and you give up either because you all get so angry with each other and so sort of dissatisfied with what the band is doing and feel you could do better on your own, or you just sort of lose interest in working together and the band having an identity, which I think what's happened to the Beatles a bit. They lost interest. I don't think we've lost interest yet, but I don't think that the only thing that holds the thing together is new projects turning up and new interests and so on. So the thing is only as long as those sort of things keep happening. I mean, I think there's other things that contribute to us not splitting up. I think as long as we've all got opportunities to do solo albums and solo projects and don't feel that we're constrained by being in a band, obviously there's that acts as, in a way, as a great it's a great asset to keeping the whole thing together, because obviously a successful band is a very useful tool to doing all sorts of things, particularly making records. So there's a lot of advantages in staying together, but you actually need a reason, beyond that to stay together. You need some feeling that what you do as a band is better than what you do as an individual. And at the moment we still got them up. But we're always going through periods where, particularly when we finished touring and finished an album and no one can imagine what on earth we're going to do next, and everyone sort of sits around thinking, God, that was ghast. Particularly after the last American, whatever was the last American tour, everyone climbs off the plane thinking, I'm retiring tomorrow. But then it all comes back together, and as soon as there's something to do, everyone gets re-enthused. But this is not our farewell tour.
No, that's not the reason I asked you the question. No. Do you socialize with the band outside the band?
A bit, yes. Roger's a good friend of mine. Less so with the others, but I mean, not because they're horrible, just because, particularly after a long time, I've seen an awful lot of it. I spent more time with that lot than I have with my family.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And they're jolly nice boys, but I mean, it's time to see some other people.
I have to ask you that question. I don't feel really pleasant asking it, but there is plenty of rumors that you're doing this tour for money, that you are skinned.
Yes, jolly good.
True or false? I mean, that's enough.
False. I mean,
Okay, we drop it there. No, I simply had to.
Yes, I've seen people saying that, but it's well, I think if we would if we were skint, we'd make another record. Touring doesn't make us a lot of money, but it shows us expenses to put on. I'll tell you what, if we were going to retour and if we were going to retire, and if we were skint, what you'd see us probably do is make another album and do a world tour. World tours seem to be the point at which bands are going to retire, because no one can do a world tour and come back with a head still in one piece, sort of thing. I mean, it definitely drives you crazy, so you obviously do it as a last resort. But that's my thing with the world tours on the way.
Tell me, how do the Floyd albums materialize? Does Watches come and bring you the score and says you're going to play this or that?
Well, in the case of The Wall, that's pretty much what happened. Except, of course, you know, even a very well set out thing changes enormously once you actually get in there and start recording it. But that was the most complete thing that's ever happened. Generally, things have been a lot bigger and been sorted out a lot more in the studio.
So you really have to work on all the material, whatever is brought in.
I mean, it's inevitable. Even if the thing is absolutely, you know, produced as a absolutely complete thing, as soon as you actually get in the studios, there's always a million changes you're going to make, you know, and we're going to alter it. And if you want the timing to be different, or when you actually hear it down on tape as a finished thing, you realize that it's too long, or that one verse doesn't work, or the solo's too long or too boring, or, you know, it just, even a completed thing is never complete.
The band has kept a low profile image for as long as possible. Remember when you played Nebel 75, I think Roger walked through the audience and nobody recognized him or something.
Very likely. Usually they don't recognize us.
I mean, why have you kept away from the audience?
Well, it's not a matter of keeping away from the audience. It's just a matter of not having lots of photographs taken.
Well,
which wasn't deliberate. It wasn't deliberate
to come across with your photo.
Yeah, but part of that is because I think it came about because of the stage shows, which, unlike most of the stage shows that were evolved over the last 12 or 15 years, well, since the beginning of rock and roll, ours were some of the early ones where there was a film going on at the same time, or coloured lights or flashing lights, so people didn't see the individuals to the same extent, and consequently it just grew from that. People knew the name of the band and liked the band or didn't like the band for, you know, what we did rather than who we were or what we looked like, and it just went on from there. That we didn't bother much with publicity photographs because it seemed a bit irrelevant, you know, when the show wasn't about that, and it just, once it had started, it kept on like that. Then we fell out with the British press very badly, I think, and so the idea of having pictures taken for papers seemed a waste of time. And there are enormous, you know, in fact, of course, life is generally much, much better for not being recognised. It makes it much easier to get on with everything else.
It's rather difficult, I mean, taking the wall presentation with all that wall in front of you. And I remember last year we were sitting quite near. But couldn't you think? We know your face is something. I mean, I knew how you look like.
Right, well, that's, I mean, one of the nice, you know, the use of the surrogate band and so on was all possible because people don't know us well enough, you know, and that those sort of devices would not be available to us if we were the Rolling Stones.
Well, I'll take your word. You played to Ascot a couple of times. A lot of people complain that it's a very awful place, or that you can get a good sound.
Well, I think we've got a good sound at Ascot.
Yes. So, I mean, it seems that there is a problem with other people.
Yes. there is a problem with other people, I have.
No, but I remember in Nebel 75, you had a problem with the sound.
Yes, we did, but that was, we could have got it right. We made mistakes, sort of thing. It's always that thing of, most things are possible if you do it correctly, and Nebworth, we thought we got it right, used our own PA and so on, and it still didn't come out right. But Earls Court, definitely, partly because we've done it before and partly because we designed a new PA system for it, which was fine.
You're very strict about the quality of your official recordings, but you, together with Dylan and maybe Ross Springsteen, were the subject of the numbers of the bootlegs. And it seems that you really, somehow that you don't mind it.
Oh, we did.
You even you even help it because you always play. In the past, you used to play numbers before you record them actually, and obviously, fans
Yes.
are eager to get new material.
The problem is that one of the best ways of rehearsing for an album was to perform live. We used to be very disappointed when we recorded first and then performed live, that after 3 concerts we'd say, why didn't we record it like that? We've changed this, we've changed that, we've made it better. And it would make better records to perform live first. Now, the thing with bootlegging is at the end of the day, all one can say is that one has to do whatever will make the best records, and people shouldn't buy bootlegs. And if the bootlegs were always so bad, and the songs were going to come out on record later, at the end, it's a rip-off. I mean, the bootleggers make rotten records, and if people buy rotten records, really it's their own fault. I wish they wouldn't. But, if you bought a bootleg and then 2 months later the record comes out, what can I say?
But it's a souvenir. And
Well, if
you were
people,
there. You were there.
yes, well, if people want those sort of souvenirs, I suppose you can't stop them buying it, but I'd rather they bought a T-shirt.
Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, was your first single for 11 years. I'm talking about this country.
Yes.
What happened that you decided to put a single out?
Because it seemed like a perfect single. It was a definite single. In a way, it was the only mistake about it is the fact that the ideas contained in the single were slightly misinterpreted without the album to show that it was part of. But as a single, in terms of music and the way the idea was compressed in 2.5 minutes and so on, fine, terrific. That's what I mean. It's definitely a single, and musically it's a single.
There was a lot of fuss about that single.
Yes, but only because people never listen to
It
people
had
like
education.
people like making a fuss. That, and particularly when a rock and roll is involved, with the potential for long hair and drugs and loose women and so on. But I mean, only because they didn't listen.
Your albums and Pink Floyd albums that about 2 rare, every 2 or 3 years, tours as well. What are you doing in meanwhile? Well, what are you
Making the damn things.
Oh well, you don't take
The
3
wall.
years, man.
Yes, the wall took over. The Wolf took forever to make. Roger spent 6 or 7 months working on the original things. Then we did a whole demo of the thing and sort of roughed it. And then we went and made the proper recording. And we were recording it from April through to December.
April 1980.
April 79 through to 1980. And then working on the shows. It's ridiculous. But I mean, we spend an awful lot of time working on these things.
So besides that, what are your hobby?
Motor racing.
Motor racing.
Motor racing.
You have seen a picture in a 1950s car dancers.
I was very likely. Yeah.
Rick Saunders says that your hobby, well, when the book was written of Pink Floyd, was sailing.
Yes, that's quite true. Just showed you how to take these things out.
Well, it was written before 1976.
Yeah. No, I used to do quite a lot of dinghy surfing. I still like it.
Huh?
I still like it, but I don't do very much of it.
Back in the 60s, the disc, that famous teeny magazine, described you as very shy, introverted, and short-tempered.
I'm less shy than I used to be. I don't think I'm really an introvert, and I don't think I've ever been short-tempered. I don't think you should rely on teeny magazines for that sort of information. For deep personality
No,
descriptions, I'd steer clear of that sort of thing. No. I don't think I'm short-tempered, but I might be. Try me. See if you can make me lose my temper very quickly.
Well, I wouldn't like you look bigger than I am. At the time, you liked Ginger Baker. Who do you respect now?
No, I still
Drummer-wise.
like Ginger Baker. I mean, I think he was a great influence.
Yeah, but he hasn't done
No, but who do I like now? No, quite a lot of jazz drummers. So Ten Willing, Good Bad That, Alphonse Moody donc, Billy Tobham, like a woman from all the sort of Mahavishnu Orchestra type of drummer. can't even remember his name. The guy, police drummer.
Oh, super.
Very good.
Top.
Yeah, very good. Who else? I don't know. I'm trying to think who's around at my own or what being played. I'm trying to think of people who, really have done something interesting and exciting recently. And I think there's been a lot of developments recently in recorded drum sound. There's people who've really listened to drums again and gone into studios and really tried to make their kits sound different. I think those are. I can't really think of many names or anyone that I've particularly.
Going back all these years, when the people started, I found out that your ambition was to do a screenplays, film screencasts. You don't know anything at all.
No.
Rick Sanders says in his book.
Rick Sanders can't be trusted either, obviously. No, I think when we were quite interested in doing film scores, because it was I'm interested in film music very much because I think it's an interesting discipline. You're given very tight timing and you're given very specific ideas, and it's very interesting to have to work to those ideas and produce something that fits exactly or more than fits, actually helps.
Well, Floyd had a couple of attempts, don't you?
Yes.
With Schroeder.
Yeah, by Schroeder. Yeah.
Around Formant and Le Valais.
Yeah.
But that was the first one was done in about 2 weeks, and the second one in about 3 weeks.
Yeah. Those were great, but then we had what we thought was going to be an enormous success with Zabriskie Point, and it got absolutely impossible. Antonioni was very hard to work through. I mean, he has a very curious method of working where he retains control, and in order to retain control, he'd make us sort of jump through hoops, and that was so wearing. I think we rather lost interest in films after that, particularly when he didn't use any of it, or only used the tiny bit.
Well, he used some.
He used some, but only a bit.
And how did it happen that you made live at Pompeii?
Someone suggested. It just seemed a very good idea at the time. And it's an old film now. I'm glad we made it. I think it's got some good things about it, and some real rubbish. I mean, I think the idea of shooting it outdoors was a very good one because it has a live feel to it, even though there's no audio, which is created by all that dust and wind and so on. But I think the studio stuff, with Careful with That Axe, and is awful. I think musically it's very dull, very lifeless.
I know, the last time I saw it, I love it.
Well, I can't watch it because I find just watching myself looking back at me across the screen so ghastly. Actually, that's not quite true. I looked at it recently. Someone sent me a video of it recently, and I watched it with absolute fascination. Seeing this long-haired rock musician wandering about with a moustache and a cowboy hat on. I think it was me. I pointed it out to my children and praised them for it.
And what was the reaction?
They didn't know who it was, and it was almost peculiar.
Yeah. How old are you, kid? The big
10 and 6. No, well, I suppose. Oh, when was it made? 73?
Yeah, it was released.
Hey, we were working on Dark Side of the Moon. It must have been made in 71. We put it on May.
And
very difficult being in a rock and roll band to this long because the history gets longer and longer, more and more complicated. And I can't remember what albums were made when. God.
How do you remember all that, at all this time, all that excitement back in 66, Don't Hans, UFO, UFO Club, you gigs at the High Prague, against Bombay, and how do you look at it now? Bit of nostalgia.
Yes, nostalgia. I mean, it was very exciting. You definitely knew that it was all happening. The band was. Those were the sort of key moments when you realised that the band actually had potential. Because particularly in those early days, for every time we played UFO or did a concert in Hyde Park or something, we were doing 12 dates around the rest of England, playing the California Ball in Dunstable or the top rank Cardiff or something, where they just hated it. You know, we'd be on
They
this
wanted to
revolving
not to do it.
stage, and we'd come round and start, and for a bit they'd listen for 10 minutes, they'd listen, and then they'd really start getting ill-tempered, bullying and generally being a real drag.
How did you involve that you left? You sounded as a rhythm and blues band, more or less.
More or less, just a sort of yes, more or less.
And how did the involve that you started experimenting with the sound?
Because we were so bad at rhythm and blues that we just desperately needed to do something else. We just, I don't know,
I mean, there are theories that Peter Jenny suggested so. Yeah, I know that is not true, but that's one of the theory.
Yeah.
that he
Oh no,
suggested.
I think probably Sid Barrett was really the, you know, Sid, he sort of, I think it was a sort of combination of things where we were probably, you know, we were doing straightforward standard rock and roll numbers, and partly through the involvement with the light and sound thing, working with Thorm and working with the Hornsey Light Sound Shop, where they needed extended pieces, the solos would get extended. And from then on, it was a case of sort of looking for new ideas in the solos, particularly, and just looking in different areas to the normal areas of playing longer and louder, of actually trying to play quieter and different sort of guitar techniques, and using, you know, bottle steel sounds that in a different way.
Have you been concerned when Sid Barrett left that?
Hmm?
Have you been concerned about the future when Sid Barrett left?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we thought it was well, we realised when he left that it was all going to be rather difficult, and you know, there was a lot of critical sort of for, I suppose, for the next year. It was very dubious about whether people would accept the band at all without Sid in it. But then it began to come together, and partly because Sid had been the main songwriter, and suddenly it was left to the rest of us to sort out who, you know, writing for the band.
But for a long time, it seemed that his shadow hovered over the band.
Well, I think it still does to a small part. You know, some people still remember the name, and but I was saying to someone earlier, I think to some extent he's used as a go, that people know that if you can keep waving some old ghost, that's another way of, you know, of upsetting us. And I think particularly in England, people like to do that a little bit. It's a bit like sort of, you know, that's the ancient Romans sending the slave and the chariot along with the conquering hero to say, "Remember thou art not a god." I mean, it's sort of remember Sid Barrett. You know, you've never done as well as you could have done if you'd stayed with Sid.